Let's talk about something incredible. In 1965, a 54-mile walk in Alabama did more than just get people's attention. It actually helped reshape American democracy. Today, we're going to dig into how this one protest became one of the most important moments in the entire civil rights movement.
But you gotta ask, right? How on earth could a single march, just a 54-mile walk, have so much power that it could literally change the laws of the United States? Well, to get that, we have to see what things were really like on the ground in the American South back then.
The whole story really starts with a right that's supposed to be the bedrock of any democracy, the right to vote. But for millions of African Americans living in the South, that right wasn't just a given. It was systematically and completely denied. And look, this wasn't subtle. It was a whole system of deliberate roadblocks. You had poll taxes, which made voting too expensive for many people. You had so-called literacy tests that were basically designed to be impossible to pass. And if all else failed, there was just straight-up intimidation and threats to keep black citizens away from the ballot box.
And this right here, this shows you exactly what that system was designed to do. Just look at these numbers from Selma, Alabama, which is where our story kicks off. African Americans made up about half the population of the city, but only 2%, just 2%, were actually registered to vote. That's not an accident. That's the system working exactly as planned.
So, when you're facing that kind of injustice, what do you do? Well, activists knew they needed to do something dramatic, something that would force the entire country to sit up and pay attention. And that something was going to be a 54-mile stand.
The plan was bold, to say the least. Two of the biggest civil rights groups at the time, the SCLC and SNCC, got together and organized a massive protest. The idea? A 54-mile march from Selma, the heart of the problem, straight to the steps of the state capitol in Montgomery. Now this part is absolutely crucial. The whole thing was designed from the get-go to be peaceful. It was a non-violent protest. Organizers, like a very young John Lewis, he was only 25 years old, were crystal clear with the demonstrators. You do not fight back, no matter what happens. Their entire moral high ground depended on it.
But that commitment to peace, it was about to be met with just absolute brutality. And that brings us to the moment that would shock the nation, the confrontation on the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
So on March 7th, 1965, this is how many people showed up. 600. 600 ordinary people marching peacefully to demand their constitutional right to vote.
So as these 600 marchers get to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they're met by this wall of state troopers. The sheriff gives them a 2-minute warning to turn around, but it wasn't even 2 minutes. Just seconds later, the troopers attacked. They rushed forward, they used nightsticks and tear gas, they even charged into the crowd on horseback. It was chaos.
And this is why everything changed. Television cameras were there. They caught the whole thing, the brutal, totally unprovoked attack. That footage was broadcast all across America, and people watched from their living rooms in horror. The event quickly got a name that fit: Bloody Sunday.
You see, the violence on that bridge was supposed to stop the movement in its tracks. Instead, it did the exact opposite. It lit a fire under the whole country, and that outrage would lead directly from that march to a new national law.
The reaction was immediate, and it was huge. Those images sparked outrage everywhere. All of a sudden, there were demonstrations supporting the marchers in over 80 cities. And civil rights leaders from all over the country, including Martin Luther King Jr., flew straight to Selma to stand with them.
The pressure was immense. President Lyndon Johnson made a huge move. He put the Alabama National Guard under federal control to protect the demonstrators. So on March 21st, they started again, this time with Dr. King leading the way. And get this, the march started with about 3,000 people, but as they walked, more and more people joined. By the time they reached Montgomery 4 days later, the crowd had swelled to nearly 25,000.
And the impact, it was direct, and it was profound. That very summer, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law. It completely banned literacy tests. It put federal protections in place for voter registration. It basically took voting from being a right that was constantly denied and turned it into a right that was finally guaranteed.
And that really leaves us with this one big idea to think about. The story of Selma is just an incredible example of the power of protest. It makes you wonder, right? How does a single event, a single moment of confrontation become so powerful when the whole world is watching that it can turn a moral cause into a real, undeniable political victory? It's a question that's just as important today as it was back in 1965.